So now beginning session 8, following on from the previous session, which you ended in talking about Adi Da's disturbance and the way all of us as devotees participated, and varying devotees having varying capabilities to cope with the force of his disturbance and his communication. And you'll go on to pass on some discussion or more or less notes that he gave to you during this time. I might just say briefly that I remember the first time I heard Adi Da shout in the early 1990s on Naitamba. It was a particularly still day on the island, imbued with his immense crashing down presence. It was palpable. You could almost feel and taste him in the environment oozing. I remember walking along the Arrow, which is a walkway that borders the divine domain where his house Indefinable is located. And I heard Adi Da shouting his displeasure. And I'd never heard a voice like that before. It penetrated every cell of my body as I walked down the Arrow. It was both voluminous in sound, but even more voluminous in city in terms of the urgency and the frustration in his voice and in his feeling about the difficulty he was facing in extending his work at that time. And I heard his shout numerous times over the years. Another time that comes to mind was in 1999, when Adi Da was residing at the Brightness, which is his Mahasamadhi temple on the island. It was a particularly difficult time. And one evening, myself and another devotee who were helping serve during that period had to go to his tent. He had a tent just down from the Brightness where he would spend time with other devotees. And it was a particularly stormy night. And myself and the other devotee had to approach the tent very quietly.
The Kosovo Wars.
It was during the Kosovo War, and Adi Da was working with that event and numerous other events that I do not know about. But on this particular night, it was particularly stormy, and the devotee and myself, who were responsible to provide bodily service to Adi Da during this time, were concerned that the tent may not withstand the force of the wind, so we had to go through the grass and through the trees and hold the tent in place for quite a number of hours while he shouted. And I literally felt like I was being fried, both with his siddhi, his divine force, but also his immense emotion. It was maddening. I completely take my hat off to any devotee, and there are a number of them who has spent way more time than I did face to face with Adi Da, hearing him shout and hearing him communicate his force of passion. It's, as I said, I've never heard an individual emote and communicate in this way. It's extraordinary.
Oh, I remember that too. Thank you. So in that light, I thought I would read something from the Knee of Listening that refers specifically to the recounting of Adi Da's life, our life with him, and even more importantly, his confession of his own process and life. This is from chapter 3, called Hearing. I'm going to put this out here, and I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I highly recommend that devotees study this chapter in light of what he's revealing in the Is Mind suite here. Again, chapter 3, Hearing. There is no such thing as anyone's autobiography. The events of experience do not, when recollected, synthesize themselves into an exact history or even an exact person. Ordinary experience does not over time become a something. It is only an irregular series of concerns for life and death. If I were to write about a few such moments of ordinary experiences, I could create an image. This, in fact, is what everyone does with memory. One highlights and defines a few, originally shapeless or indefinable, events, identifies each of them with a particular defining emotion, and thus, by a kind of artistic effort, makes a narrative, and even invents a particular and separate self. Thus, one conceives of oneself as a someone by means of the device of partial contemplation. But if one could include it all, utterly and entirely, and consciously and utterly perceive the real nature of experience at any moment, there would be no particular or separate person in the mind. There is no emphasis and no design in the whole. No particular and separate thing stands out at the point of totality. Therefore, the more deeply and completely one experiences the recollection of one's ordinary life, the more arbitrary every mark becomes. Nevertheless, there are a few unique events in what, as a concession to the conventions of ordinary communication, I refer to as my own life, that stand out whole by themselves. They neither signify nor justify any inherently or otherwise and utterly separate life, nor do they define or describe an artificial, synthetic, or merely presumed person. Rather, they are events that communicate or cease to hide reality. And these events are the genuine subject of my autobiography. They are the events in my early life that uniquely and fully demonstrate what I refer to as true humor. And they do not speak of my human instance alone, but they are moments in the universally communicated and universally knowable life of reality itself. Therefore, those events reveal the truth of who I am, which ultimately is the truth and identity of everyone and all. So to bring that into this particular moment in time in which he is interacting with me in the context of a creation of images that is addressing the seemingly presumed and self-created identity of a someone as the divine reality that he is, as the I am, the he and she is me, remembering that in this suite he is communicating about not merely the male and female in conventional or exoteric terms, but it is about the he and she in ultimate or exoteric terms. And in referring to the image art then, in She Is Mind, he said that he wanted to entitle the whole suite, She Is Mind, the Iconography of Eve. And he wanted to make clear that She Is Mind is not meant to be a conventional imaging of the biblical account. He says that he's commenting on it from a traditional Judeo-Christian point of view, but rather he's not commenting, oh, darn, I have to start that again. Sorry. She Is Mind is not meant to be a conventional imaging of the biblical account, commenting on it from a traditional Judeo-Christian point of view, but rather a means of dealing with that story as a universal cultural myth. So that means it's not just associated with a Judeo-Christian point of view. It's deeper than that in the psyche of humanity. So this suite, as he says, as a whole is the iconography of Eve. In other words, the symbols, the structure, the meaning of mind. Thus, She Is Mind is not merely a biblical Adam and Eve story, although there are elements, associations, metaphors that make reference to the Eden myth. She Is Mind goes beyond the cultural, participatory particularity of the story from Genesis, because the suite is a universal communication about the body-mind. There are all kinds of meanings present in the imagery. What is she? What is he? What is apple? What is chair? At the beginning of the suite, there is Eve and there is Adam. Then there is Adam and Eve, undifferentiated from each other. Finally, there is Adam and Eve as light, utterly undifferentiated and non-different from anyone or anything whatsoever. This is the primary story that is told in visual terms through the course of the suite. So I'll refer back to this in a moment. Now, the reason I read this is because in the midst of this iconic imaging, he's dealing with this universal myth. And in doing so, he's working with not only myself, but he's also working with who was my intimate partner at that time. And as this, we have told the intervention about our relationship and beloved's Adi Da's intervention in terms of calling me back to participate in this in relationship to what was occurring with Nick and I in the terms of the process of our each individual relationship to him directly and our relationship together. So always in the apparent background, there was Nick. Because in the time period of his making of this suite, there was the reality process of self-observation and self-understanding relative to the limits that were still present in my direct relationship to him, Nick's relationship to me, Nick's relationship to Beloved directly, and that included all of us who were surrounding him. So again, he's not just speaking to me in this particular communication, as he indicates. He's speaking to this particular form of patterning. And so he, Nick, as a he, she as me, Julie, he's addressing the he and she, the man and the woman, the male and the female, the dynamic between the two of us as sexual egos, emotional sexual egos, and our relationship to him as bright being. And he had to give these notes to me because he was noticing my disturbance, about his disturbance, and my pulling away, and not wanting to deal with the complexity of the situation and the dramatizations amongst us around him, and interfering with the profundity of what he was doing. And so he suggested that I might need to go on retreat. So I did begin, because he said I needed to purify what I had taken on in the context of leaving his most intimate sphere. And he gave those same criticisms not to just those who had left his intimate sphere, but he also indicated that these kinds of retreats were necessary for anyone who was around him. Get thyself on retreat. In other words, drop out from the dynamic of multiplicity and concentrate most succinctly in the direct core process. Be in the room with me and allow that deepening to occur. Be in refuge and retreat in relationship to the divine bright person itself. So I attempted to go on a retreat like this, but what happened is that I actually ended up using it as an escape route to get out of the tapas itself. So I'll tell you the notes, read you the notes. So these are notes that were given on March 24th. And they are communications, as I said, to me as the escape artist. He would often say that I would often use Nick and even a liability in my person to have a back door or a way out of here. And I kept him in my back pocket. And he must have received a report about me from the culture, or obviously he didn't need to receive a report from the culture, but he was observing these things about me, because even while I was in his intimate house, I was calling Nick up on the telephone from the AV closet, and for a couple of reasons. One is that I was starting to go out the door and wanting to maintain that link of being able to have an intimate that I could live with if I couldn't continue to sustain the intensity again. And to make note that this was 10 years later after my relationship to Nick was blessed by Beloved, unexpectedly occurred. And I was also concerned about what was happening with Nick himself in terms of his own direct investigation and process with Beloved. Because I love him, and I still love him deeply, humanly and also as a devotee. And we are bonded in that eternal context. So I don't remember who gave these communications to me directly, but that's not significantly relevant. I think it could have been one of the women who were serving his intimate sphere culturally, which were always around those who were in his Gurukula. So this is what he said to me. She said she had ended this relationship with Nick. However, she is involved in a constant drama. She made promises to me in coming here, and now she is listening to her mind. She said she had accepted my conditions, but I feel her unsteadiness. She always makes a drama out of the emotional, sexual domain. She goes to her mind about everything. She only made this decision to have to work it out with Nick again when she thought she may not be able to have direct access to me. And he's referring to the moment in which he asked me to go on retreat, because going on retreat meant that I wouldn't be going in and out of his house to serve him intimately. I'd have to step out further into going into the meditation halls and such for access to him. So he continues, it is just gross-minded bondage and a justification to be involved in a drama. So no, I didn't embrace the gift of him asking me to go on retreat to strengthen the depth of my yoga with him. I used the purpose of retreat to continue to dramatize. So she is not keeping her agreement that we made when she came here. And this is why I have now had to take her off retreat, because she is not actually practicing on retreat. So she should know that what she was doing on retreat, that was not practice. I actually was aware of that. She always seems to be involved in this kind of drama, and this is why I cannot give her responsibilities, because she's not practicing now. And when she's not practicing, she cannot be trusted, because she's always going elsewhere. This is what other devotees also do, and this is why I cannot give them any responsibility. And I am sick of these temporary enthusiasms. When they do not get what they want to leave. And I can't give such people responsibilities. So, the hell with Nick. She made her agreement with me. And now there's nothing that I can take seriously because of her dramatizing again. Her mind is a constant drama. She is in her mind and in a constant drama. She can't seem to get herself straight, and therefore she goes back to Nick. She asked to be able to be in this situation again, but it can't be based upon a temporary enthusiasm. She came here based on direct agreements with me. So again, to hell with Nick, and that something has to be resolved with him. In that regard, then, there's nothing that I can take seriously in her. She came here, and now she cannot stay straight. So she says she has to go back to Nick to get out of this situation with me. She told me that this whole drama had come to an end in a reality process with me, and she had seen where it was all going, and that she did want to live as a renunciate. She wanted to live spiritual life rather than an ordinary life. She wanted to be taken seriously. She asked to be in this situation, and now she wants out. She has an ambiguous neurosis, the same as always. And I am seeing the early signs of it now. In doing so, she is completely controlling everyone with her drama. She is not being a surrendered devotee. She is constantly changing her mind. She is too much into controlling everything. She insists on this drama and is doing the same all over again. She should have no room for this drama or Nick, nor should she be taken seriously or take any mind forms seriously. This is not Nick's business. What does this have to do with being a devotee of mine and practicing for real? She should either put up or shut up. And where is the culture that is obliging her to do this? Where is the culture obliging all devotees to do this? Quit putting this bullshit in my face. It's always about her and Nick and not about devotion. Where is her spiritual life? Because of her coming and going, it interferes with my being able to finish this suite. If she is unresolved with Nick, I cannot justify her being here because she will disappear. This is a gross misuse of me. This is not stability or a life of practice, nor is there any cultural accountability. You cannot put someone like this in the middle of my house. This is an inherent requirement that she does not do this. She'll just find some bullshit way to get out. And she is neurotic just like many other devotees. She is unable to surrender, and she is in control. She is into her control games. She made real agreements with me. She even told the whole worldwide culture that she should never be allowed to leave, because that was the agreement that I had with her and with the culture. So she's addicted to also controlling Nick. In her letter to me, she talks about making use of my darshan, going through and beyond this, and to make use of all these conditions, the ones that I agreed to with him and the culture, for doing this sadhana. I could have a lot more for her to do if I could trust her. It's not about Nick. This is not about Nick. It is about moving out from her spiritual practice with me and her refusal to surrender. No one exists in a man-woman relationship to me. Each individual who lives as my devotee, that is the way that it is. It is each individual who lives as my devotee. So I cannot call her to a greater service in my house. I had her come here to bring a different quality to my house. But this place cannot be a place of drama and mind forms to continue. I wanted a larger sphere of service because there is no devotional culture around me. And I wanted her to help create this culture. And I have to finish this suite. So for now, she can take on a peripheral service and establish her practice for real, and I can see what she can do. She is controlled by her own mind and patterns. She is manipulating everyone with her own mind and emotion. She left the gathering and did not practice and got into all emotional justifications for all of it. She degraded her life, sitting apart from the gathering. There they are, the perfect couple, Nick and her life. She has multiple lives. She can't live her disparate life all at once. She flips between the two, and this creates an unsteadiness. It is of primary importance to her, if it is of primary importance to her to live a devotional life and a spiritual life, it cannot be in this unsteadiness. So this is an incredible, great blessing to have received this direct instruction, because here he is speaking to me very personally about the psychobiography of the ego of this apparent persona that is incarnate here in time and space, manifestly so, identifying as an ego act to its presumed to be separate body-mind self. Why? Because I had not consistently and have not yet consistently entered into the context of his space and his blessing and his instruction and his regard within a culture that is also obliging me accountable to this kind of direct instruction that is unique to each devotee individual. And this requires in detail inspection of the psychobiography of the ego. This is not speaking case. This is actually radical self-understanding. So in response to his instructions to me, because he gave me a segue, he gave me an open door where he said she can serve me a bit more peripherally and I'll see what she can do. And during this time, he did continue to work on the suite. And I was able to come into the room where he was sequencing and continuing to serve him in that context. So I chose there to stay there and to serve him because I didn't want to do the same thing over again, and to be there for him to be able to finish the suite. And I was very grateful to be able to stay there, even though it was a magnified tapas of greater depth of understanding and then a deepening of sensitivity to him and what he needed to do.